On November 14, 1884, a photographer was called to Ashworth State Asylum in northern Massachusetts to take a group portrait of patients in Ward C, the ward reserved for women deemed incurably insane. The photograph shows 12 women seated in 2 rows. Their faces are blank, their eyes hollow, their hands folded in their laps. Behind them stands a nurse and the ward supervisor. This photograph was discovered in 2023 in a sealed archive, and here's what makes it disturbing. According to the asylum's admission records, Ward C housed 12 female patients on November 14, 1884. According to the asylum's discharge records, no patient from Ward C was ever released. According to the asylum's death records, no patient from Ward C ever died. But after November 15, 1884, the day after this photograph was taken, Ward C was completely empty. 12 women, 12 patients, 12 human beings, gone. No transfers, no releases, no deaths, no escapes, just gone. For 139 years, no one asked what happened to them. No one noticed, no one cared, until a researcher named Dr. William Chen found the photograph and began counting the faces. What he discovered would expose one of the darkest secrets in American medical history. But I need to warn you about something. This story has 3 parts. The first part will make you uncomfortable. The second part will make you angry. And the third part, the part about what really happened on the night of November 15, 1884, will make you question everything you think you know about how we treated the mentally ill. Some of the names in this photograph have been identified. Some of the women have living descendants today. And one of the women wasn't a patient at all. Stay until the end, because the final reveal, the one about who took this photograph and why, changes everything. Dr. William Chen had worked at Harvard University's Department of the History of Science for 11 years. His specialty was institutional medicine, the history of hospitals, asylums, and sanatoriums in 19th century America. He had published 2 books on the subject and was considered one of the leading experts in his field. In September 2023, Dr. Chen received a call from a colleague at the Massachusetts State Archives. A collection of materials from a defunct asylum had been discovered in the basement of a state office building during renovations. The collection had been sealed since 1901 and never cataloged. The colleague thought Dr. Chen might be interested. He was. The collection contained 2,847 items spanning from 1871 to 1999. Patient intake forms, medical records, administrative correspondence, financial ledgers, and 234 photographs. The asylum was called Ashworth State Asylum for the Incurably Insane. It had operated from 1868 to 1899 in a remote area of northern Massachusetts, approximately 40 miles from Boston. At its peak, it housed over 400 patients, men, women, and children who were deemed too mentally ill to be treated elsewhere. Ashworth was not a hospital in any meaningful sense. It was a warehouse, a place where families sent relatives they could not care for, and society sent people it did not want to see. Patients entered Ashworth. Very few ever left. Dr. Chen spent 6 months examining the collection. Most of the materials were routine, the mundane bureaucracy of institutional life: meal records, supply orders, staff schedules, death certificates. So many death certificates. The mortality rate at Ashworth was staggering. In some years, 30% of patients died. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, dysentery, malnutrition, exhaustion from mania, general paralysis of the insane. But one photograph caught Dr. Chen's attention. It was labeled, in faded handwriting, Ward C Patients, November 14, 1884. The photograph showed 12 women seated in 2 rows on what appeared to be a covered porch. They wore identical gray dresses, the standard uniform of Ashworth patients. Their hair was cut short, a common practice to prevent lice and make patients easier to manage. Their faces were expressionless. Some stared directly at the camera with empty eyes. Others looked away, as if unaware a photograph was being taken. Behind them stands a nurse and the ward supervisor. This photograph was noted in his catalog and moved on. But something nagged at him. Something about those faces. Something about those empty eyes. 3 days later, at 2 o'clock in the morning, he woke with a thought that wouldn't let him sleep. He had seen Ward C mentioned in other documents. He had seen patient counts. He had seen staffing records. But he couldn't remember seeing any death certificates from Ward C. He couldn't remember seeing any discharge records. He couldn't remember seeing any transfer documents. He went to his office at 6 a.m. and began searching. And what he found, or rather what he didn't find, would launch an investigation that would consume the next 18 months of his life.
Ward C was established in 1879 as a specialized unit for female patients classified as incurably insane, women whose conditions were deemed permanent and untreatable. This included patients with severe schizophrenia, advanced dementia, catatonia, and what Victorian doctors called moral insanity. The ward was located in a separate building on the Ashworth grounds, approximately 200 yards from the main asylum. It was a 2-story brick structure with barred windows and a single entrance. The isolation was intentional. Ward C patients were considered dangerous, unpredictable, and disturbing to other patients. According to asylum records, Ward C typically housed between 10 and 15 patients at any given time. The women were supervised by a dedicated staff, 1 ward supervisor, 2 nurses, and 3 attendants. Dr. Chen found the admission records for Ward C from 1879 to 1884. In those 5 years, 31 women had been admitted to the ward. Then he searched for what happened to those 31 women. 19 had died. Their death certificates were in the archive, documenting causes ranging from tuberculosis to exhaustion. 0 had been discharged. 0 had been transferred. That left 12 women unaccounted for. Dr. Chen cross-referenced the names with the patient list for November 14, 1884. The date of the photograph. The 12 missing women were the same 12 women in the photograph. He searched every document in the collection, every death record, every transfer form, every administrative letter. Nothing. After November 14, 1884, these 12 women simply ceased to exist in the asylum's records. But here's what made Dr. Chen's blood run cold. The asylum's daily census, account of all patients conducted every morning, showed Ward C with 12 patients on November 14, 1884. On November 15, 1884, the census showed Ward C with 0 patients. The ward was listed as temporarily closed for renovation. It remained temporarily closed for renovation for 3 months. When it reopened in February 1885, it had new patients, new staff, new records. The 12 women from the photograph were never mentioned again. Not in any document, not in any letter, not in any report. It was as if they had never existed at all. But Dr. Chen had proof they existed. He had their faces. He had the photograph. And he was determined to give them their names. Dr. Chen enlarged the photograph to examine each face individually. The image quality was remarkable for 1884. Sharp, well-lit, professionally composed. Whoever took this photograph knew what they were doing. He began the painstaking process of identification, cross-referencing faces with the admission photographs that had been taken when patients first entered Ashworth. One by one, he matched faces to names. Row 1, left to right. Patient 1, Martha Holbrook, age 34, admitted 1881. Former school teacher from Boston. Diagnosis, melancholia with delusions. Her family committed her after she claimed to hear the voices of dead children. Patient 2, Agnes O'Brien, age 28, admitted 1880. Irish immigrant, worked as a domestic servant. Diagnosis, hysteria and moral insanity. She had been committed after becoming pregnant outside of marriage. The father was her employer. Patient 3, Constance Whitmore, age 52, admitted 1879. Widow of a wealthy merchant. Diagnosis, senile dementia. Her sons committed her after she refused to sign over control of her late husband's estate. Patient 4, Ellen McCarthy, age 19, admitted 1883. The youngest patient in Ward C. Diagnosis, hereditary insanity. Her mother had been committed to a different asylum, and Ellen's family believed she would inevitably follow. Patient 5, Dorothy Fisher, age 41, admitted 1882. German immigrant. Diagnosis, religious mania. She claimed to receive visions from God and refused to stop preaching to other patients. Patient 6, Harriet Dunn, age 37, admitted 1880. Former nurse. Diagnosis, puerperal insanity. She had suffered a mental breakdown after the stillbirth of her third child. Row 2, left to right. Patient 7, Bridget Sullivan, age 31, admitted 1883. Irish immigrant. Diagnosis, mania. She had attacked her husband with a kitchen knife after years of documented abuse. He survived. She was committed. Patient 8, Clara Jennings, age 45, admitted 1881. Diagnosis, involutional melancholia. She had attempted suicide twice following the death of her daughter. Patient 9, Mary Abbott, age 26, admitted 1884. Admitted just 3 months before the photograph. Diagnosis, nymphomania. Her crime, she had been caught having an affair.
Patient 10, Louisa Warren, age 49, admitted 1879. One of the original Ward C patients. Diagnosis, chronic mania. She had been in the asylum for 5 years. Patient 11, Ruth Chambers, age 33, admitted 1882. Former seamstress. Diagnosis, delusional insanity. She believed her neighbors were poisoning her food. Patient 12, unknown. Dr. Chen froze. Patient 12, the woman seated at the far right of the second row, did not match any admission photograph in the archive. He searched again, and again, and again. No match. This woman had never been officially admitted to Ashworth Asylum. She was not in the patient records. She was not in the admission log. She was not in the census data. But there she was, in the photograph, wearing a patient's gray uniform, seated among the 11 other women of Ward C. Who was she? Why was she dressed as a patient? And why was there no record of her existence? Dr. Chen looked closer at patient 12's face. Unlike the other women whose expressions were vacant and defeated, patient 12 appeared alert. Her eyes were focused on the camera. Her posture was straighter. Her hands, though folded like the others, seemed tense. She looked like someone who was pretending to belong.
And then Dr. Chen noticed something else. Patient 12 was not looking at the camera. She was looking at the man standing behind her, the man in the dark suit, the ward supervisor. His name was Dr. Ezekiel Ashworth. Yes, Ashworth, the same name as the asylum. This was not a coincidence. Dr. Ezekiel Ashworth was the son of the asylum's founder, Dr. Nathaniel Ashworth, who had established the institution in 1868. When Nathaniel died in 1877, his son Ezekiel, then 32 years old, took over as superintendent. By 1884, Ezekiel had run Ashworth Asylum for 7 years. He was, by all accounts, a respected figure in Massachusetts medicine. He published papers on the treatment of insanity. He spoke at conferences. He advocated for moral treatment, the idea that the mentally ill should be treated with kindness rather than chains. But Dr. Chen found troubling patterns in the records. Under Ezekiel's leadership, the asylum's mortality rate had increased by 40%. Under Ezekiel's leadership, the number of autopsies performed on deceased patients had tripled. Under Ezekiel's leadership, Ward C had been established, a ward that, according to one asylum inspector's report from 1883, he personally supervised with unusual interest. The inspector's report also noted something strange. Dr. Ashworth has requested that Ward C be exempt from the standard inspection protocol. He claims the patients are too disturbed to tolerate visitors. This request has been granted, though I note it is unusual. Ward C had not been inspected by outside authorities since 1880. 4 years. 4 years in which Ezekiel Ashworth had complete, unsupervised control over 12 women deemed incurably insane. 4 years in which anything could have happened. And then on November 15, 1884, those 12 women vanished. What had Ezekiel Ashworth done? What had he been doing for 4 years? And why had he allowed a photograph to be taken the day before they disappeared? Dr. Chen needed to find answers. He needed to find records from outside the asylum, newspapers, police reports, family correspondence. He needed to find out what happened on the night of November 15, 1884. And he needed to identify patient 12, because patient 12, he was beginning to believe, was the key to everything. Dr. Chen expanded his research beyond the asylum archives. He contacted local historical societies, searched newspaper archives, and reached out to descendants of asylum staff. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. In January 2024, Dr. Chen received an email from a woman named Patricia Holbrook Green. She was the great-great-granddaughter of Martha Holbrook, patient 1 in the photograph, the former school teacher from Boston. Patricia had seen Dr. Chen's inquiry about Ashworth Asylum posted on a genealogy website. She had information. My family never talked about Martha. She was a shameful secret, the shameful aunt locked away in an asylum. But my grandmother kept a box of old letters. I found them after she died. Some of them are from Martha, and some of them are about what happened to her.
Routine. Martha writing to her sister about asylum life, complaining about the food, asking for news from home. But 3 letters were different. The first, dated September 1884, contained a disturbing passage. Quote, "Dear sister, I must be careful what I write, for they read our letters, but I must tell someone. Dr. Ashworth has begun something terrible in Ward C. He calls it treatment. He says he is trying to cure us, but sister, we are not being cured, we are being used. I cannot say more, but if anything happens to me, know that I did not die of natural causes. Know that I was murdered by medicine." End quote. The second letter, dated October 1884, was more urgent. Quote, "Sister, there is a new woman here. She is not a patient, I am certain of it. She asks questions. She watches Dr. Ashworth. She has told me, in whispers, that she is here to expose him, that she works for a newspaper, that she will tell the world what he has done. I do not know if I believe her, but she is my only hope. Her name is Sarah." End quote. The third letter was dated November 10, 1884, 4 days before the photograph. Quote, "Sister, Sarah has told me everything. Dr. Ashworth has been conducting experiments on us, medical experiments. He has seen his notes. He has seen the bodies. Sister, 7 women in Ward C have died since I arrived, not from illness, from experiments. Dr. Ashworth is testing surgical procedures on living patients. He removes parts of our brains. He injects us with chemicals. He documents everything, photographs everything, because he believes he is advancing science. Sarah is going to expose him. She has arranged for a photographer to come on November 14th. The photograph will be evidence. The women in the photograph will be proof of who was here, who was alive before something happens to us. But Dr. Ashworth is suspicious. He knows something is wrong. I am afraid, sister. I am afraid I will not survive long enough to see justice. But if I do not survive, remember me. Remember all of us, the 12 women of Ward C. Do not let us be forgotten." End quote. There was no fourth letter. Martha Holbrook was never heard from again. Dr. Chen now knew patient 12's name, Sarah, and he knew she wasn't a patient. She was a journalist. He searched newspaper archives from 1884 and found her. Sarah Hartley, age 29 in 1884, investigative reporter for the Boston Daily Advocate, a progressive newspaper known for exposing corruption and abuse. She had previously written exposés on sweatshop conditions, political bribery, and child labor. In September 1884, the Advocate had received an anonymous letter claiming that patients at Ashworth Asylum were being used for medical experiments. The letter included details, names of patients who had died, descriptions of procedures, accusations against Dr. Ezekiel Ashworth. The editor assigned Sarah Hartley to investigate. Sarah's plan was bold. She would pose as a patient, get admitted to Ward C, document the abuses from the inside, and then publish an exposé that would shut down the asylum and send Ashworth to prison. Getting committed was disturbingly easy. In 1884, a woman could be committed to an asylum with nothing more than a doctor's signature and a family member's consent. Sarah convinced a sympathetic doctor to sign the papers, and her brother, aware of the plan, formally committed her. She entered Ashworth Asylum on October 3, 1884. For 6 weeks, she lived as a patient in Ward C. She witnessed the conditions, befriended the other patients, and gained their trust. She watched Dr. Ashworth and documented his activities. What she saw horrified her. Dr. Ashworth was indeed conducting experiments. He was testing a procedure he called cerebral modification, early crude attempts at psychosurgery. He believed that mental illness was caused by physical defects in the brain, and that removing or damaging certain areas could cure patients. He was wrong. The procedures did not cure anyone. They caused brain damage, paralysis, personality changes, and death. But Ashworth kept trying, kept refining, kept documenting his failures and his rare successes. The women of Ward C were his test subjects. They had no families who would ask questions. They had no legal rights. They were incurably insane. Society had already given up on them. They were, in Ashworth's view, perfect experimental material. Sarah documented everything. She memorized names, dates, and procedures. She formed a plan with a photographer friend, Thomas Green, who would come to the asylum on November 14th, posing as an official photographer hired to document the facilities. He would take a photograph of Ward C. Every woman in the photograph would be proof, documented evidence of who was alive on November 14th, 1884. If anything happened to them after that date, there would be a record. There would be faces. There would be evidence. The photograph was taken. Sarah was in it, posing as patient 12. But something went wrong. Dr. Ashworth was more suspicious than Sarah realized. He had been watching her, and he had discovered who she really was. What happened on the night of November 15th, 1884? Dr. Chen spent months piecing together the evidence. He found fragments in newspaper archives, in police records that had been misfiled, in letters written by asylum staff who later resigned. This is what he believes happened. On the evening of November 15, 1884, Dr. Ezekiel Ashworth gathered the staff of Ward C in his office. He informed them that all 12 patients, including Sarah Hartley, would be transferred to another facility immediately. The transfer had been arranged secretly, he explained, because the patients were too dangerous to move through normal channels. The staff were told to say nothing. The patients would leave that night. There would be no records, no paperwork, no questions. But there was no transfer. That night, under cover of darkness, Dr. Ezekiel Ashworth and 3 trusted attendants removed the 12 women from Ward C. They did not take them to another asylum. They took them to the asylum's basement. The basement of Ashworth Asylum contained several rooms that did not appear on any official floor plan, rooms that Dr. Ashworth used for his experiments, rooms where he performed his surgeries, rooms where he documented his work, and rooms where he disposed of his failures. In 1899, when Ashworth Asylum was finally closed due to financial difficulties, a partial renovation of the building was attempted. Workers discovered a sealed door in the basement. Behind the door was a room. In the room were bones.
Human bones. An investigation was launched, but it was quickly closed. The asylum's records had been sealed, the same records Dr. Chen would find 124 years later. The bones were buried in an unmarked grave on the asylum grounds. No identifications were made. The official explanation: the bones were unclaimed deceased patients who had been improperly buried by previous administrations. No one asked how many bones there were. No one asked who they belonged to. No one asked about the 12 women of Ward C. Until Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen's investigation revealed more than he expected. The photograph that Thomas Green took on November 14, 1884, the one showing the 12 women of Ward C, was supposed to be published in the Boston Daily Advocate as part of Sarah Hartley's exposé. It never was. On November 17, 1884, the Advocate's offices were damaged by a fire. The fire was ruled accidental, a knocked-over oil lamp. But the fire destroyed Sarah Hartley's notes, her evidence, and the original photograph. Thomas Green, the photographer, kept a copy of the photograph, but 3 days after the fire, he disappeared. His family reported him missing. He was never found. The Advocate published a small notice. Reporter Sarah Hartley is believed to have perished in the recent office fire. Her remains have not been recovered. But Sarah Hartley did not die in the fire. She died in Ashworth Asylum, in the basement, with the other 11 women she had tried to save. Dr. Ezekiel Ashworth was never charged with any crime. He continued to run the asylum until 1895, when he retired due to poor health. He died in 1901 at age 56, the same year the asylum's records were sealed. His obituary described him as a pioneer in the treatment of mental illness and a compassionate physician dedicated to his patients. No mention of Ward C. No mention of the 12 women. No mention of the experiments. No mention of murder. Dr. Chen faced a difficult decision. He had identified 11 of the 12 women in the photograph. He had found living descendants for 7 of them. Did they have a right to know what had happened to their ancestors? He decided they did. In March 2024, Dr. Chen contacted the descendants individually. He shared his research with them. He showed them the photograph. He told them the story. The reactions varied. Patricia Holbrook Green, Martha's descendant, wept. "My family spent generations ashamed of Martha. They called her crazy. They said she disgraced the family. But she wasn't crazy. She was a prisoner. She was a victim. And she was brave. She tried to tell someone. She tried to leave a record." Another descendant, James McCarthy, great-great-grandson of Ellen McCarthy, the 19-year-old girl, was angry. She was a child, 19 years old, committed because her mother was mentally ill, and some doctor decided she was a perfect subject for his experiments. She deserved a life. She deserved a chance. But the most emotional reaction came from unexpected source. Dr. Chen had been unable to identify any descendants of Sarah Hartley, the journalist. He assumed her line had ended. She was young, unmarried, and died before having children. He was wrong. In June 2024, a man named Robert Hartley contacted Dr. Chen. He was 71 years old, retired, living in Connecticut. "Sarah Hartley was my great-grandmother's sister," he said. "The family knew she had died in 1884, but no one knew how. She just disappeared. My great-grandmother spent her whole life wondering what happened to her sister." Robert had documents, letters Sarah had written to her sister before entering the asylum, letters describing her plan, her fears, her determination to expose Ashworth. One letter, dated October 1, 1884, 2 days before Sarah entered Ashworth, broke Dr. Chen's heart. "Dearest sister, I know what I am about to do is dangerous. I know I may not return, but I cannot stay silent while women are being tortured and killed in the name of medicine. If I do not survive, do not mourn me. Remember me as someone who tried. Remember me as someone who refused to look away. And if you never learn what happened to me, know this: I died fighting. That is enough." The Ashworth Asylum photograph now resides at Harvard University's Countway Library of Medicine, where it has been preserved and digitized. It is officially titled Ward C Patients, November 14, 1884, and is accompanied by Dr. Chen's research identifying each woman. In 2024, a memorial was erected on the site of the former Ashworth Asylum, which had been demolished in 1953. The memorial lists the names of all 12 women: Martha Holbrook, age 34, Agnes O'Brien, age 28, Constance Whitmore, age 52, Ellen McCarthy, age 19, Dorothy Fisher, age 41, Harriet Dunn, age 37, Bridget Sullivan, age 31, Clara Jennings, age 45, Mary Abbott, age 26. Louisa Warren, age 49. Ruth Chambers, age 33. Sarah Hartley, age 29. The inscription reads, "In memory of 12 women whose lives were taken by those who were supposed to protect them. They were not incurable. They were not forgotten. They were human beings who deserved dignity, care, and justice. November 15, 1884. Dr. Chen published his findings in the Journal of the History of Medicine in September 2024. The paper, titled "The Women of Ward C, Medical Experimentation and Institutional Murder at Ashworth Asylum, 1884, became one of the most read articles in the journal's history.
But for Dr. Chen, the academic recognition meant little. What mattered was the photograph. What mattered was the faces. What mattered was that after 139 years, someone had finally asked what happened to these women. Someone had finally noticed they were missing. Someone had finally given them back their names. There is one more detail. One detail that Dr. Chen kept out of his published paper. One detail that he shared only with the descendants. When the bones were discovered in Ashworth Asylum's basement in 1899, they were hastily examined and buried. No formal identification was attempted. But in 2024, Dr. Chen obtained permission to exhume the remains. Modern DNA analysis confirmed what he already knew. The bones belonged to adult females, consistent with the ages of the Ward C patients. But there was something else. Among the bones was a small metal object, a locket. Inside the locket was a tiny photograph, a miniature portrait of a young woman. The portrait matched the face of patient 12, Sarah Hartley. She had carried her own photograph into the asylum, hidden in a locket around her neck. She had carried it through 6 weeks of living as a patient. She had carried it through the night of November 15th. She had carried it into the basement. She had carried it to her death. And for 139 years, her face had been buried with her, waiting to be found, waiting to be remembered, waiting to tell the world what happened to the women of Ward C. The photograph on your screen shows 12 women. They are not statistics. They are not footnotes in medical history. They are not incurably insane. They were Martha, who heard the voices of children and tried to warn her sister. They were Agnes, who committed the crime of becoming pregnant. They were Constance, whose sons wanted her money more than her freedom. They were Ellen, who was condemned at 19 for her mother's illness. They were Sarah, who walked into hell to tell the truth. They were 12 human beings who were betrayed by a system that was supposed to protect them. They were victims of a man who believed science justified cruelty. They were forgotten for 139 years, but not anymore. Look at this photograph. Look at their faces. Remember them, because they are not the only ones. In asylums across America and Europe, thousands of patients were subjected to experiments without their consent. Thousands died. Thousands disappeared. Thousands were never identified, never mourned, never remembered. The photograph of Ward C is not an anomaly. It is evidence of a system that treated the mentally ill as less than human, a system that allowed doctors to play God, a system that buried its victims in unmarked graves and sealed its records and hoped no one would ever ask questions. Someone is asking now, and we will not stop until every name is known, until every story is told, until every victim is remembered. The 12 women of Ward C waited 139 years for justice. How many others are still waiting?